This video is to help you learn about the digestive system using the models in the lab. So I'm going to be moving in and out and taking things here and there. Hopefully it's easy to follow. We're going to start off with this torso model going up to where the digestive system begins, and that would be with the mouth here, as well as then the oral cavity, which is the space inside of our mouths. You can see we have the teeth, pretty easy for people to identify. We've got the tongue right here on the model. And then what we need to learn about especially are the three different types of salivary glands. The first type is called the sublingual, which is found underneath the tongue. That's what sublingual means, beneath the tongue right here. The next one is called the submandibular, and it would be here a little lower, under the mandible, the submandibular salivary gland. Now the third type, the parotid, could be found over here as well, but they've removed so much tissue in the making of this model that they had to represent it over on this side. Right here in front of the ear is the very large parotid gland. And in the case of all of those glands, there's one on each side, a left and a right. So this is the parotid gland, salivary gland, and then the other two we saw before. Then on the model, we can't really see down the throat. It's not meant for that. So the food would get swallowed into what's called the pharynx, and then much of the digestive tract so far is going to be blocked by this respiratory system. The larynx here, and then the trachea down there. Here's the thyroid gland. We go down, down, and then eventually here with the heart removed and the respiratory system sort of splitting, here, this colored tube right there, that represents the esophagus, where the food travels down after being swallowed, down to the stomach. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. That esophagus is fairly deep. This large structure here is the liver. It blocks our view of its continuation. And that esophagus is going to connect here to this stomach, the J-shaped pouch on the upper left quadrant of the abdomen. So I'm going to take this liver out of here, and we'll come back to that. But here then you can see back here, here's where the esophagus finishes. The lower esophageal sphincter would be right here as this esophageal tube enters into the stomach. So you can see how it's kind of a J-shaped pouch here. As we look at it this way, the stomach does have a couple different parts to it. This part that sticks up above where the esophagus comes in, so generally right in here. Okay, this is known as the fundus, or the fundic region. The area right where the esophagus does enter in, this is the cardia, or the cardiac region. This large area, this is known as the body of the stomach. And then as it bends and kinks and curves back here, this is known as the pylorus, or the pyloric region. So those are the four parts to the stomach. Again, you have fundus, cardia, body, and pylorus. If we take a look inside of the stomach, take the front half off, you can see that the model maker has tried to represent what are called the gastric rugae, all of these folds and ridges that occur in here. And so these provide extra surface area in the stomach, and then they begin to flatten and rise as the stomach churns, really helping to agitate and mix the stomach contents. So once again, here's that lower esophageal sphincter, that narrowing of the end of the esophagus. So we come around here to the end of the stomach, then in this spot, right here on the model, it sort of pinches and tapers. This would represent the smooth muscle of the pyloric sphincter, right here. So that's at the end of the stomach before the food content gets on into the small intestine. This represents the beginning of the small intestine, what's known as the duodenum, or some people say duodenum or duodenum. And that's about the first 12 inches or so of the small intestine. And on the model, it's right here, that hollow opening, and then it curves down. And our large intestine, this gray, sort of blocks our view for a second. Before I come back to that, I do want to point out the parts of the liver. Remember, the liver would normally be sitting right in here, like that. All right, so I'm going to remove it again so we can see the parts of it. I'm going to set it down. So when viewed this same way as looking as it would sit in the body, this would actually belong to the right side of this person. This is the right lobe of the liver, and this smaller piece is the left lobe. And then to see the rest of the structures, we have to flip it over. and take a look what we have here. Here we have kind of a long, thin lobe of the liver, and I use that shape to think of what its name would be. You do have to know a little bit of medical terminology for this to make sense. This is called the caudate lobe of the liver, caudate. And caudal or caudate refers to a tail of some type. So to me it does kind of look like a tail, kind of long and thin, and I happen to know the word caudate refers to a tail, so that kind of makes sense to me. This last piece then here is rather square. This is known as the quadrate lobe, quadrate. Quad meaning four, so like a square it has these four rather straight sides. So again, I use its name and its appearance to try to find a reason to name it that. Quadrate having four sides, caudate being like a tail. Then here's the gallbladder. They have it stained green on the model because ours is typically that way as well. So it's tucked up under this right lobe of the liver. So those are the parts of the liver you need to know, and the gallbladder. Now we come back, and actually even before we do the small, I'm going to take the stomach out and reveal what's hiding behind it. This lumpy gland-like structure here running kind of left to right, this is the pancreas right here. And this is the pancreatic duct running through its core, helping to deliver its juice to the small intestine. So back again, remember this is the duodenum, the beginning of the small intestine. And I'm going to remove this to put it back later. There we can see the duodenum continue. It's been cut to view the inside. These are called circular folds, these ridges along there. And then the model maker just sort of makes it run into this representation of the small intestine here. Technically the next region of the small would be called the jejunum, but we can't really say on something fake like this when that has truly happened. So we don't ask you literally for the jejunum part of the small intestine. The third part of the small intestine is the ileum. And while it still may look very jumbled and difficult to tell, if we remove this, there is just a little bit of the small left on the model. And if the ileum is the end of the small intestine, then we know that with this being the last little piece, this would represent our ileum if we question you on it. So that little ending as it runs here into the large, that would be the ileum. Now for the large intestine, let me put this piece that I took out back. So it would sit in there like this. Everything you see that's gray belongs to the large intestine. So it kind of makes a box shape around the small, and I'm going to go through each part. I have to set this down for a second. At the very beginning of the large, there's this dead end pouch, and ours flips open to reveal the inside. So this little pouch here is called the cecum. And coming off of it is the appendix, sometimes called the vermiform appendix. And the connection between the ileum and the cecum is called the ileocecal juncture or the ileocecal valve. And it's just sort of that pinched gray region, those two pieces that come together. That's right in here, that juncture or valve or sphincter, ileocecal. Close this up again. Then the material passes here into this area that ascends. So this is the ascending colon of the large intestine, ascending colon. Then I'm replacing the transverse colon. Transverse means to go across, so that's the transverse colon. And then over here, the colon bends again and begins to send its material down the left side of the body. This is the descending colon. And then the colon makes one curve and back the other way. So this region is known as the sigmoid colon. Sigmoid means shaped like the letter S. So it does this double switchback like an S. That's the sigmoid. And then back there, a little different color, more of a purple. That's meant to be the straightening of the large intestine. That would be the brief part known as the rectum. Rect means straight. And this is the bladder, so it's kind of blocking the view of the end of the story there. One last thing would be back here on any of these parts of the large intestine. These pouches are known as haustra. So it's sort of like the rugae of the stomach or the circular folds of the small intestine. It's sort of a distinguishing feature, anatomical feature of the large intestine, these haustra, each of these pouches that you see. And that should take us through then all of the material for the digestive system. So I hope that's helpful. Good luck.